If there is one thing I want you to take away from this class is improving your observational skills to look at an interesting piece of clothing you find on the street and applying that on your artwork, and understanding how silhouette is important to make clothes feel real and feel believable. Hi, I'm Gabriel Picolo. I'm a Brazilian comic artist. Right now, I'm working with the Teen Titans at DC Comics. I'm also well known for my original graphic novel, Icarus and the Sun. Today's class is going to be about clothes for your comic characters. I'm going to go through what's important on a character's wardrobe. I'm going to talk about observation, trends, fashion trends. Going to share with you guys like the resources I use when I'm looking into inspiration. I'm going to talk about silhouette. As you can see from my work, I'm very interested in sneakers and streetwear culture. Today, I'm going to be doing 2 different character designs, and I invite you to join me. You can draw with me, or you can follow the assignments that I'm going to leave at the end of the class. For this class, I'm going to be using Mobile Studio Pro, Wacom, Paint to Saya software, and also Photoshop. I created some templates that you can find at the class resources section, and you can use them to follow along while you're watching the class. This class was recorded live, and I was very happy to interact with the students while I was drawing this class. All right, let's get to drawing.
Hi, I'm Becca. I'm a producer here at Skillshare, and I'll be your host for today's session. So without further ado, let's get started.
Hey everyone, to get started, I want to show you how a brief of a character design looks like, how I receive a character brief from my writer, and I have to draw their wardrobe before even starting to draw the comic. So characters wardrobe is a thing that I go through on my work before starting the project. And that's one thing that me and Cami Garcia is the writer of the Teen Titans graphic novels. And we kind of came up with that on the go, because when we worked on Teen Titans Raven, it was our first graphic novel together. It was the first time writing a graphic novel. It was my first time working on one. So we had to like kind of connect our creative voices in a way. We had to like understand what, like I had to understand what the characters looked like in her head, and she wanted me to draw the characters like from scratch before actually going to the comic, because that will save us a lot of work on the long go. So I picked for you guys like a small description. That's like what you would find if you worked on with a writer on a graphic novel or a comic. This is what it looks like. So this is one of the character descriptions that Cami sends to me before we even start the project. And when she sends this, she wants to see like maybe 2 or 3 sketches from me. So we get to see these characters, see like envisioning this character as a person. So this is the description for Stella. She's a character on Teen Titans Beast Boy, my most recent graphic novel. And I wanted to show you how the description translates into the actual drawing. So matching the description, Stella is a petite girl, brown eyes, brown hair. She dyes her hair blue. She kind of has like this tomboy vibe, funky, athletic. She's shorter than Gar. So I tried to put all of these information into these first sketches. This is a wardrobe for Garfield for Beast Boy before I even start the book. So I'm going for a regular guy, not trying too hard. He's a vegan, so I try to incorporate that on the t-shirt. He's into dinosaurs, so I try to incorporate that as well. So you can see where all that goes. Of course, he loves sneakers, so I drew the signature sneakers that he never changes. This is a character concept for Raven. So what we were going for here was like goth girl, but not way too model, not way too not too dressed up, because Raven had to feel like a teenager. So we had to like had a wardrobe that would be real to her budget. So Cami asked me not to put too many accessories, not too many fancy clothing on her. So that's the importance of creating a wardrobe for a character before even starting the project, because it saves us a lot of time. It makes us see these characters as people before even making the panels. Okay, so let's start. What I'm going for with these characters is for the first one, I'm going for a grungy summery vibe. For the second one, I'm going for a jock vibe, okay? I give myself these assignments before drawing characters, so I know what I'm going, what I'm like, what kind of references I should look into, what kind of vibe I'm going for the characters. So for our first example, I'm gonna start with a male character with a sporty look. Okay, so one thing I love to do on characters is draw like what's most trendy in fashion. Fashion is something that became kind of important to me after I became a sneakerhead. It kind of like seeped in because I started collecting sneakers, and at the same time I started like getting into streetwear. And I'm always following trends. And one trend that I noticed recently is baggy clothes are back, like oversized clothes. I think it's a trend calling back, it's a callback from the 2000s, maybe not, but that's definitely something that's back, like the baggy clothes. And that's the sort of clothing that I'm going to draw on this jock character. I'm not going for the varsity jacket kind of style. I'm going more for a basketball jock. So baggy clothes. One thing that I noticed working with a colorist on my graphic novels is I always try to make some interesting print on my characters' t-shirts, because it's boring for a colorist to color like plain t-shirts. So I'm definitely going to add a print on top of this on this shirt.
So how do you think about how the fabric is supposed to drape and kind of like interact with the body as you're drawing? Do you think about like what the fabric is, what type it is, how heavy it is? How do you kind of make it look real?
If there's a lot of fabric, if there's like an excess of fabric, like on this character, there's not going to be a lot of wrinkles on it. So let's say, hold on. Let's say it is super tight t-shirt. It's gonna like add to the natural shape of the character's body, and it's gonna have like a lot of wrinkles. The body bends, so let's say shoulders, chest, division from chest to torso. Whenever there's this like connections, you're gonna see a little wrinkle if the shirt is super tight. So wrinkle here. This is like super tight t-shirt. Can you see the difference? And a baggy one is not gonna have a lot of wrinkles in it. Just like some main ones, so we can see where it's attaching on the body. I feel like not only this baggy 2000s callbacks coming on, and also kind of like sporty wear is a trend right now. And I'm talking about like what I see on the streets. I'm in Brazil, I'm in São Paulo, but you possibly can see something like that on like New York and LA, because most of the fashion influencers that I follow are from these places.
Gabriel, can you talk a little bit about how you decide where to put the folds in the clothes when they're a lot looser? So is it the same rules, just different, or do the folds kind of go in different places when the fabric is really loose?
No, when it's loose, you just have to be careful, because you just gotta draw like the main wrinkles. You don't have to draw all of them. So you can see on this character, like there's almost no wrinkles on this cloth. Just like this one because the body is like bending over here, and that's it. I can even make the t-shirt even wilder. So you can see it's kind of covering, almost covering the entirety of his arm. That will be my tip for baggy clothing. Like, don't exaggerate on the wrinkles. They're gonna be there, but only on the main band. So let's say you're wearing, hold on. Let's say this character is wearing like a sweater, baggy sweater. There's a lot of like wrinkles on the connection of his elbow because the weight is all over there. Same rule for the t-shirt, not a lot of wrinkles. And then at the end, where the weight is, you're gonna see.
What brush are you using right now to do your outlining?
This is the default airbrush from Paint to Sai. I don't know if you guys know that, but I learned how to draw digitally using Paint to Sai. So I kind of grew myself attached to this software because it's really beginner friendly. I love it. Like the brush is super smooth. I do all my coloring on Photoshop. We're gonna switch back to Photoshop at the end of the class. But as far as line work goes, I always use Paint to Sai. Now my favorite part, which is drawing sneakers. I can spend like the rest of the class here, but I'll try to go as fast as I can. So going back to silhouettes, everyone asks me how do I draw sneakers well, and the thing is you have to like try to capture the silhouette of the sneaker. So let's see. Of course, I'm drawing a basketball sneaker on him. So what I do is I try to capture the silhouette before adding the details. One of the advice that I give you when it comes to sneakers is you can always try to envision the soles of the shoes. And then you can build the sneakers from top, like on top of it. It's another method I use sometimes.
Do you ever use a particular kind of shoe or item of clothing that you see like in real life and just translate that directly onto a character, or do you always kind of make up new pieces of clothing?
All the time. Like I rely a lot on observation. Whenever I'm like on the street, whenever I go for a walk to do anything, and I'm always like looking at my surroundings and trying to capture like what's going on, like what people are wearing. So I wouldn't say I create anything. I just save everything on like on a mental library. And at some point it becomes second nature. Like you're just used to doing it. Which is why I think exercising observation is so important for clothing. I remember my first time in New York City, which was when I recorded my first Skillshare class. I was amazed by people's style because it was so different from anything I've ever seen. I almost felt like sitting at a McDonald's and like drawing people who are passing by because everyone's so stylish in a way, you know, or another.
We've gotten some questions on shape language and how you think about shape language when you're drawing, when you're creating your wardrobe, and how you kind of connect it to your characters. Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. I think shape language is kind of the same thing that I meant with silhouette. It's like having elements play together on a character. So one thing that I noticed that is very much a trend is the chunky sneakers, and I absolutely love them. And why are they a trend? Why like the influencers and the fashion bloggers love them so much? Because it gives like a very specific silhouette to your body. So people wear like shorts and they have their skin naked, and then at the end they wear the sneakers which are like super chunky. So it creates, wait, this shape, which I think is very cool. So you can see here, I increased the size of the shoes because it didn't feel right. Even it was way too connected to his feet, but it didn't feel right as the sneaker I'm trying to portray. So you can play around with that. Exaggerate on the clothing until it feels right. I think that adds up to the silhouette thing and to the shape language.
So, Gabriel, do you have any tips on specifically how you make your characters memorable?
Yes, one thing that I try to do is I try to create one or 2 points of interest. So let's go back to, hold on. I'm going back to Gar. So you can see with all these clothing, I'm focusing on one or two things tops. Because if there's too many points of attention, if there's too many logos, if there's too many accessories, I think it's overkill. It's way too much, and it can be like it can be perceived as like trying too hard to be like a memorable character design, and it can fall short. Instead of creating a memorable character, you create a very forgettable one. So you can see here, like he's wearing basically like regular clothes, but he has a super cool print on his t-shirt that you can spend time looking at, and his sneakers are kind of cool too. So like that's 2 points of interest at tops. On this one, he's wearing like a wait. He's wearing like regular clothes, and then he has a bomber jacket with some cool patches on it, and that's where you spend time looking at, and that's it. So that's one thing that I think it works for my characters. I wouldn't say it's a rule of thumb, like it's a golden rule, but I think it's something that you can try to incorporate, creating like one or two main points of interest on your character, and try not to overdo, because that's the thing that I see a lot on character design. And I'm doing this again on this character because he looks super basic, but I'm going to do like an interesting print on his t-shirt. I think there's only so much our eyes can perceive when we are looking at a character. You can either make like a very interesting hairstyle, a very interesting piece of clothing, but never like too much. And with my own characters, Icarus and the Sun, which they are basically naked, but I have the fact that the Sun is made of fire, so there's always like her hair flowing around, and Icarus is made of wax, so he's always like dripping. So I have this point of interest on these characters, so that rule still applies even if they're not wearing any clothes.
I have another question for you. How do you find a balance between style and practicality, especially for characters that have to have a lot of action and need to be able to move around a lot?
Another very good question. One thing that I learned doing comics is that I will never do like a super complex t-shirt on a character, because I know that I'll have to draw that same t-shirt over and over and over again. And looking at a t-shirt on a character sheet or a character design looks awesome, it looks incredible, but when you have to draw that character over and over, it can be tiresome. So one rule of thumb is whatever you're drawing has to look good from afar. Because let's say I'm going to draw a character on a panel that the character is like this size, the size of like a nail head. You have to at least know what character is, who that character is. So I'm not gonna draw like tons of small details on it because it won't be visible. I'll just be wasting time. So that's a good rule of thumb. Imagine that character on a super tiny panel. Will that accessory, will that piece of garment be recognizable? Then you can draw it. If not, you're probably wasting time. And that goes back to silhouette, because whatever is showing up on the silhouette character, so let's say the character has like a cool piece of armor or on one shoulder, that definitely is going to show when he's like tiny on the screen. So it's worth putting there. Just as an example. Okay, let's go to character number 1. As I said, I'm going for a grungy summery vibe on this one. Imagine a girl like who lives in California. That's the look I'm going for.
So Gabriel, we've gotten some questions about how to draw dresses. I don't know what your plan is with this character, but any advice you have around dresses, heels, sounds like those kinds of clothes have a lot of questions around them.
Okay. Those are not clothes I usually like drawing. But the general advice I can give on dresses is study drapery. If you just type on Google drapery, you're gonna see a lot of like clothing flowing around. Just save any of those images and try to replicate it. That's gonna give you like the general look of how a dress should flow like. So let's say. She's wearing a dress and it starts over here. It's usually not very interesting for me because you just be drawing drapery, folding over and over and over. That's why I don't draw dresses a lot, if you can see on my work. So that's basically it, like drawing clothing flowing with the shape of the character's body. Heels is a little bit more complicated because you have to change the shape of the character's foot, because it's not going to be planted on the ground. So let's say. the shape of the feet will be like this before you start the silhouette of the heels. And that's why it's so complicated.
We had a question about necklines and any advice about placing them correctly so they look realistic.
On guys, usually it's not gonna go out too far from the circumference of the neck. So usually it doesn't show any of the trapezium unless it's like a tank top. So that's like a shirt and t-shirts, and then everything else is gonna stop on the neckline. But if he's wearing a tank, it's gonna show just a little bit of this bone over here that I don't know the name in English. That will be like a tank top. You can totally go wild. Like I've seen tank tops that go like this, showing like almost the full chest of the guy. Usually gym bros use shirts like that. But for guys, like the general rule of thumb is stopping over here where the neck ends. With girls, you can go a little bit wilder. Like usually they don't like they can stop on the neck, but the most that I've seen like goes over this way, like shows a little bit more of the neck, and then this bone over here, the one that connects on the shoulder. I forgot the name of this bone. I'm super sorry for that. Collarbone. Thank you so much, Chloe. Collarbone. In Portuguese, it's called clavícula. Totally different. Okay.
We had a few questions about layering clothing and kind of how you deal with when clothes layer over each other.
Because you usually don't do a lot of layering.
Well, I was just going to say, if the advice is avoid layering, then that's okay too.
I think the one advice I have for layering is be considerate of what the clothing on beneath what you're putting on top of is. So let's say if I added a jacket on this character over here, and he's wearing a super baggy t-shirt, that shirt's probably gonna be like he's probably gonna look super large because he's already due with the t-shirt, the oversized t-shirt. So let's say if I try to add like it will have to be like a oversized jacket or whatever, because the shirt that he's wearing beneath it is super large. Ooh. So like his silhouette's gonna look gigantic. See, like I can't pretend that he's not wearing a super oversized t-shirt. I have to respect that first level of clothing that's already there. with the first character example, the clothing that she's wearing beneath the t-shirt is super tight to her body, so that's not a problem. So that's also an advice when doing layering. If you're gonna put something baggy on top, put something tight underneath. Here in Brazil, we use a lot of flip-flops because it's warm all the time. But I've noticed as a fashion trend that we are moving to slippers. At least here in São Paulo, I've seen much more slippers than I've seen flip-flops, which is insane because we Brazilians, we wear flip-flops a lot. Okay. I think that's it for the first character. Now I'm gonna color these. That's the fun part. So now that the line work's done, we're gonna start coloring. What I usually do, I go from Paint to Side and open Photoshop. Another thing I wanted to mention is I know what color schemes I'm going for, but please save reference. Feel free to use reference. I use it all the time. And I know that this is a huge debate on the artistic community, like if you should or should not use reference. And I don't know where I would be without reference. So you can see on my computer, that's a very common kind of picture on my phone or on my computer. Like if I'm drawing like a sneaker or anything, I just take a picture. And that goes for color palettes. I have an entire folder just with like reference for clothing. That's something I usually recommend you all to do.
Do you make a separate layer for each color that you add?
Not really. I just create like 2 or 3 layers just to separate elements that are close to one another. So for this character, I'm probably creating like 3 layers so that I can lock the layers and color on top of them. Even though I try to be as organized as I can with layers, when I'm finishing a full-on illustration, I tend to end with 100, 150 layers. It's crazy. And that's because I don't merge them. Like I'm not organized at all. So 1 layer for the skin, I'm opening a layer on top of it for the clothing.
And how do you think about the color palette that you're going to be using to kind of pull together the clothing and the skin and everything, and decide on the colors that you're going to use?
Okay, so going back for the theme that I'm going with these characters, the first girl is supposed to be a summery vibe. So I'm going for pastel pinks, probably. summery, happy colors. With the guy, I'm going for something not too fashion forward, like more like with basic colors, because he's a jock. He's not like super fashiony. I'm probably doing something interesting with his t-shirt, like doing some interesting print, so that he has this look of like not trying too hard, but also not boring. If the jock looks too boring, I may try to change his hair color, make like a blue or something. Because one thing that I always consider when drawing characters is their hair color and how that's gonna interfere with the rest of the clothing. Because I dyed my hair blue once, not blue, like green blue-ish, and it was awful because I was always wearing black because I didn't want to like pick any other colors because it was always too much information over here. So I always have that in mind. So let's say when I'm doing Starfire has like multiple colors on her hair, and you can see on my drawings that I'm always having her wear like basic white t-shirts because there's already a lot of information over here.
What brush are you using now, Gabriel?
Default brush as well. I don't tend to use different brushes. I'm probably going to use like one very specific brush when I adding like final touches, but I'm not a guy who usually changes brushes a lot because it's just too much information for me, not my style. I usually have like one or two special brushes for textures and stuff like that. And I can share that with the class later.
You talked a little bit about kind of like too much information, not enough information. How do you kind of decide, all right, this is too much or this is not enough? Is it just like a judgment call looking at it, or do you kind of have a formula or a best practice that you tend to follow?
It's totally judgment, but I go back to that rule of thumb to add like one or two main points of attention. And if I do 2 points of attention, I try to make them like separate. So let's say 1 point of attention is on the hair of the character. It's like there's a lot of detail, a lot of colors. And then the other point of attention is on their footwear. That usually works for me, or on their bag and stuff like that.
Gabriel, we got a question about your hand glove. Is it just so it doesn't interfere with the tablet?
Yes, because this tablet specifically, I'm using a Mobile Studio Pro, and I don't know if you guys have this equipment, but if you do, you know that it gets super hot. So that because if I use my bare hand, it starts to get sweaty, and it's.
So why do you color in Photoshop instead of staying where you were at, first of all?
That's mainly because of Photoshop's resources. It's a really good software. It lags a lot, it has a lot of problems, but it has too many resources that Paint to Site simply doesn't have. You're gonna see at the end of this illustration, kind of like the final touches. I do everything on Photoshop, and those things don't even exist on Paint to Site. So it's not even worth finishing my drawing there. That's my process of thinking. It's not even the color, it's not even coloring itself. It's more like the final details. At the end of this, I'm going to add the noise effect that I always do on my drawings, and that's only on Photoshop. I know that you can probably do it on Procreate. I've heard that they have a lot of like new resources, but I've never tried Procreate, so I can't comment on it. And finally, we can make some final tweaks, some final adjustments to make these characters come to life. Okay, so here's one thing that I use a lot, selective color. That's like my ultimate secret for coloring, because I don't know shit about coloring, but I use selective color a lot. And what's that? It's a button over here. I think you can see it on Photoshop. It is this round ball thing. You can create like an adjustment layer. And I'm gonna create an adjustment layer for coloring, which is selective color. So with this, I can change the shade of blue on the character's head so that it matches a little bit better the rest of the color scheme. There you go. So that you can see the difference. So right now it's a little bit more related to the rest of it. And by the way, the colors, I'm looking at my shared screen on my Mac. It's completely different from what I have on my mobile studio. So you probably better trust me at the end result of it, because I just looked at it and it has nothing to do with what it's on my screen right now. But that's okay. I know that happens. I think the advice still stands.
So some people have asked if you ever used Procreate, or if they don't know Photoshop, what should they use?
Okay, Photoshop is the opposite of a beginner-friendly software because it has too many resources. Until you learn what's specific for artists, it can take a while. It can be intimidating. The one software that I recommend a lot is Clip Studio. I think you can see I have it on my computer over here. It's really great, especially if you're doing comics, because it has like very specific tools that Paint2Sign and Photoshop don't have. So like creating panels, creating balloons, dialogue, and it has almost the same color resources as Photoshop. I'm just too lazy to get used to Clip Studio. I'm just too used to Photoshop. That's why I don't finish my drawings there. But it's just as good as Photoshop if you're starting out, and it's less confusing. Because Photoshop was created like for basically everything. And we artists, we're trying to use just a small portion of the software.
So there's been a lot of questions about how you kind of do the detail on the shirt that you've been talking about, of like, how do you choose the color for the detail? If you're going to add detail to the shirt, how do you align it with the wrinkles? How do you like make sure it's not too detailed?
I think I'm going to try adding tie-dye print on top of the guy's t-shirt. Let's see how that goes. So I downloaded this template online. You can totally find it like just type tie-dye print. And by the way, tie-dye is a thing that is kind of made a comeback on 2019. That's why I have this template saved on my computer. It's not even for this class. I just had it. Okay, so I'm gonna copy it. Control A, Control C, Control V. There are many ways that I can attach this template on his t-shirt. I'm doing like the easiest, laziest one. I'm just creating a clipping mask on top of it. See, create clipping mask on the layer, like on top of where I colored his t-shirt. And now I'm just gonna play around with the adjustment layers that I talked about before. That's my biggest secret to coloring. That's what I do all the time. I just play around with these until I find a result that I like. So right now it's still pink. I'm gonna do pink on the other character. So the one that I used, the first layer adjustment that I used was, hold on. Just gonna select just the shirt so I don't get any unexpected results. I'm doing this with the lasso tool on Photoshop. So I just selected with the lasso tool and I'm going to adjustment layers. Let's adjust the saturation because I don't like the pink. I'm going with this turquoise kind of blue aqua. Reduce the saturation because it's too much. Now I'm adding another adjustment layer on the same shirt with the same selection. And I'm doing curves. Curves is like, it's just like contrast. You change like how dark and light things are. I'm making the print a little bit darker so it's more noticeable. And then again, the colors on the screen that I'm looking at on my Mac are completely different than the ones that I have. So just trust me on this, okay?
We've also gotten some questions about how, if you're going to add text, do you draw it on? Do you use a font? How do you kind of deal with the wrinkles of the material when you want to add text?
Okay. That's a really, really nice question too, because I add text all the time, especially on comics. So let's say I want the shirt to say, Nashville, which by the way is the shirt that I drew on Beast Boy yesterday. I just typed it with the fonts. The Photoshop has this feature. I am not sure if Clip Studio has it, probably does. And I'm just going to free transform the font on the t-shirt. Here's a pro tip. If you want to really deform the font that you're using, you can Ctrl-T, which is free transform. It can be Command-T if you're using a Mac. And then you go to this icon over here on the screen. Oops. And see that it's on custom. It can be like any kind of deformation, but I usually do custom because it has like, I have more freedom to transform it the way that I like. So take a look at the logo over here. Let's see, I wanted to make it more roundy. I can make it the shape that I want. And I use these a lot. Apply, and that's it. I just did the selective color thing again. And I just changed my brush too. Usually when I'm shading, I use a soft brush.
And are you shading onto a specific shading layer, or are you straight onto your already color layers?
On the top of my skin layer. I just locked that layer, that lock over here. You can see like the square thing. You lock it, and then you're free to do whatever you want on top of it.
And for the text on the t-shirt, how come you didn't worry about the fold that goes through the word Nashville? Like, it doesn't need to be distorted there at all?
That's totally a choice. It can be distorted, like, but people usually don't notice that. But it can totally be distorted if I wanted to. Hold on. There you go. But that's like, you do it if you want. But whoever noticed that has a very, very good eye.
And what brush are you using to shade now?
It's still the same default brush, but now it's the soft one, not the hard edges. It's the soft edges.
How do you decide the shading color that you're going to use, Gabriel?
On this case, like the color palette for this character is going towards blue, so I'm just trying to make the shading cooler than the color there's actually happening. So I just added red, and I went for the red shadow that was the coolest, so that it attaches, so the color palette makes more sense. And like I said, if I'm not sure of what I'm doing, I just use selective color or curves or hue saturation, those adjustment colors, the adjustment layers, until I find something that I like. I'm gonna show you how I do the noise texture that I like so much. So I selected the whole area of color that I used that I color my character. I'm gonna create a new layer on top of it all and paint it with a middle gray. There you go. Then I come here on filter, noise, add noise. These are the configurations. It's Gaussian blur, Gaussian noise. The amount is for 100%, like the most you can put on. It's gonna look fuzzy like this. And then the final touch is filter gallery. You go to brush strokes, spatter. The thing that spatter is gonna do, it's gonna like make the noise a bit less grainy and more like an effect. Like less, the grain is not gonna be as tiny, it's gonna be a little bit bigger. There you go, and then you change that layer that you did all of this, you change it to overlay, and that's it. I just use like 30–20% opacity, and that's the effect that I get. Thank you so much for joining today. I had so much fun. Hope to do more of these, and I hope that today's class helped you just a little bit into creating characters' clothing and understanding a bit more of my process too. I have a fun assignment for you all. You can find some templates that I created for you at the class resources section. You're gonna use those to create a very specific kind of look. I'm going for a skater, so the character uses a skateboard and he's like into skate culture. So that's one. The second one, I want to see an e-boy or e-girl, or it can be a non-binary character also, but it's like it has that goth vibe, that new goth vibe that we are seeing. I would love to see your work. Whether you follow the class or created your own characters, you're welcome to share them at the project gallery. If you want to dive deeper into character design, you can totally check out my other class at Skillshare that goes through the poses, how to create poses for your characters. Thanks again for watching this class. I had a ton of fun and hope to see you around.